The USS Horizon moved quietly through the dark space near the edge of human territory. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge looking at the stars through the main window. His ship was on a normal patrol mission when something strange appeared. On their sensors, Chief Engineer Lisa Grant called out from her station that they had found something big moving toward them. Jake walked over to look at the screen. What he saw made his heart beat faster. Dozens of ships were coming their way, but these ships looked nothing like any human vessel he had ever seen. They were huge and had a dark green color that seemed to glow in the starlight. The ships moved in perfect formation like they had done this many times before. Ryan Blake, the tactical officer, checked his weapon systems and reported that the alien ships had very powerful energy readings. The shields around the strange vessels were stronger than anything humans had ever built. Jake knew his small exploration ship would not stand a chance in a fight against even one of these alien vessels. A message came through on the communication system. The voice that spoke was deep and cold, with sounds that no human throat could make. The alien spoke in perfect English, which surprised everyone on the bridge. The voice said that it was Admiral Zexai of the Corvathi Empire, and that humans would listen to what he had to say. Jake took a deep breath and opened a channel to respond. He introduced himself as Captain Morrison of the United Earth Fleet, and said that humans came in peace. The alien admiral made a sound that might have been laughter. Zexai said that peace was not something the Corvathi were interested in discussing. The main screen lit up and showed the image of Admiral Zexai. The alien was tall with green scales covering his face and neck. His eyes were yellow and looked at Jake like he was studying an insect. Zexai wore a uniform that was black with silver markings, and Jake could see other aliens moving around behind him on their ship's bridge. Admiral Zexai began to speak about the Corvathi Empire. He explained that his people had conquered different worlds across the galaxy. Each race they met had tried to fight back, but all had failed because Corvathi technology was far superior to anything other species could build. The Admiral's voice carried no emotion as he described how entire civilizations had been forced to serve the Empire. Jake felt his hands tighten into fists as he listened to the alien's words. Zexai continued by saying that humans were just another primitive species that would soon join the others under Corvathi rule. The Admiral looked directly at Jake through the screen and said that resistance would only cause unnecessary suffering for the human race. The ultimatum came next, and it was simple and terrible. Humanity had 30 standard days to surrender, or their colonies, and submit completely to Corvathi authority. If humans refused or tried to fight back, the entire human race would be wiped out completely. Zexai said this like he was discussing the weather, with no feeling or concern for the billions of human lives he was threatening. Lisa Grant whispered to Jake that the alien ships were scanning the horizon with equipment far more advanced than anything humans possessed. Ryan Blake reported that their weapons would barely scratch the paint on the Corvathi vessels. Jake realized that his ship and crew were only alive because the aliens allowed it, probably so they could deliver the message to Earth. Admiral Zexai explained that humans should not think about fighting because it would be pointless. He said that Corvathi weapons could destroy planets and that their shields made their ships nearly impossible to damage. The Admiral seemed genuinely puzzled that any species would even consider resisting when faced with such overwhelming power. Jake asked why the Corvathi wanted to conquer other worlds instead of living in peace. Zexai replied that strong species naturally ruled over weak ones, and that resistance to this natural order only caused pain and death. The Admiral said that humans should be grateful for the chance to serve a superior civilization. The communication ended with Admiral Zexai giving Jake coordinates where human leaders could send their surrender. The alien Admiral said that he expected humans to be reasonable and accept their fate quickly. Then the screen went dark and the massive Corvathi fleet began to move away toward the center of human space. Jake ordered his crew to set course for Earth immediately. As the horizon turned toward home, everyone on the bridge remained silent. They all knew they were carrying the worst news in human history. Jake looked at the stars one more time and wondered if humans would still be free to explore them in 30 days. The thought of his species becoming slaves to the cold-hearted Corvathi made him feel sick. But he knew that feelings would not stop what was coming. The journey back to Earth would take 3 days, and Jake spent that time thinking about the impossible choice facing humanity: fight and die, or surrender and live as slaves forever. The emergency session at United Earth Council began 3 hours after the USS Horizon reached Earth. Captain Jake Morrison stood before the largest gathering of world leaders in human history. Every nation had sent representatives, and millions more watched through live broadcasts across all human colonies. President Helen Carter sat at the center of the council chamber, her face showing the weight of the decision she would have to make. Jake told the council everything about his encounter with Admiral Xi and the Corvathi fleet. He described their massive ships, their advanced technology, and their cold demand for complete human surrender. The room remained silent as he explained that humanity had 27 days left to decide between slavery and death. Dr. Nathan Cross, Earth's leading expert on alien life, studied the recordings from the Horizons encounter. He had spent years wondering what first contact with aliens would be like, but he never imagined it would be a demand for surrender. Nathan examined every detail of the Corvathi ships and their technology, looking for any weakness that might help humanity survive. President Carter addressed the world that evening. She spoke from the White House lawn, with the flags of every Earth nation behind her. Helen explained the threat facing humanity in simple terms that everyone could understand. She told the world that aliens had come to Earth, but they did not come in peace. Instead, they came as conquerors who wanted to make humans into slaves. The reaction surprised everyone, including Helen herself. Instead of panic and chaos, humans around the world responded with anger and determination. Protests filled the streets, but they were not protests against the government or the aliens. They were rallies calling for resistance against the Corvathi Empire. People carried signs saying that humans would never surrender and that freedom was worth fighting for. Admiral Susan Hayes received orders to gather every available warship for Earth's defense. Susan had served in the fleet for 30 years, but she had never faced a challenge like this one. The entire human fleet consisted of only 47 ships, most of them designed for exploration rather than war. Against the 300 Corvathi vessels, the human fleet looked pathetically small. Colonel Peter Wright began working on battle plans in a situation room deep under military headquarters. Peter was known for thinking of unusual solutions to difficult problems, but this challenge seemed impossible. How could 47 ships fight 300 ships that were far more advanced? Traditional space warfare would result in human defeat within hours. Dr. Nathan Cross made his first important discovery while studying the Corvathi ship designs. The aliens used energy shields that seemed perfect, but Nathan noticed something strange about how they worked. The shields had to lower their power for brief moments when the ships redirected energy to their weapons. During these moments, the Corvathi ships might be vulnerable to attack. Captain Jake Morrison volunteered to lead a dangerous mission back to Corvathi space. He wanted to get closer to their fleet and gather more information about their technology. Jake knew it was probably a suicide mission, but he also knew that humanity needed every advantage they could find. Lisa Grant worked day and night to modify human weapons and ships. The Corvathi technology was far ahead of anything humans had built, but Lisa believed that creativity might overcome raw power. She began designing new ways to use human equipment that the aliens would not expect. Meanwhile, the Corvathi fleet moved slowly through human space, taking their time because they believed humans would surrender without a fight. Admiral Xi sent regular reports to the Corvathi High Command, describing human preparations as pathetic and amusing. The admiral could not understand why humans were gathering their primitive ships instead of preparing surrender documents. Ryan Blake joined the Defense Planning Committee and shared his observations about Corvathi tactics. The aliens seemed to rely completely on their superior technology and did not appear to have much experience with enemies who fought in unexpected ways. Ryan suggested that humans might have a chance if they could surprise the Corvathi with tactics the aliens had never seen before. President Carter met with leaders from every human colony to coordinate their response. The colonies on Mars, Luna, and the outer systems all pledged to fight alongside Earth. Helen realized that for the first time in human history, every person on every world was united behind a single cause. The threat of slavery had brought humanity together like nothing ever had before. Dr. Nathan Cross discovered that Corvathi biology might have weaknesses that humans could exploit. The aliens seemed to be cold-blooded creatures who might be sensitive to certain types of energy. Nathan began working with military scientists to develop weapons that could target these biological vulnerabilities. As the days passed, more volunteers joined the defense forces than the military could handle. Young people left their jobs and studies to enlist, while older citizens demanded to help in any way they could. Factories around the world began working around the clock to produce weapons, ships, and supplies for the coming battle. Admiral Xi watched these preparations through long-range sensors and reported to his superiors that humans were behaving irrationally. The admiral could not understand why a species would choose certain death over reasonable surrender. In all of Corvathi history, No conquered race had ever continued fighting when defeat was mathematically certain. The final week before the deadline arrived with humanity as ready as they could be. Everyone knew the odds were against them, but no one talked about surrender anymore. The 30 days ended exactly as Admiral Zexai had promised. The Corvathi fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. 300 alien warships moved in perfect formation toward humanity's homeworld, their weapons charged and ready for what they expected to be a brief demonstration of power. Admiral Susan Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, humanity's flagship, watching the approaching enemy through the main display. Around her, the 47 ships of Earth's defense fleet waited in what appeared to be a traditional battle formation. Susan knew that every captain and crew member understood they were probably going to die today, but not one ship had asked for permission to withdraw. Admiral Zexai opened a communication channel to the human fleet as his ships drew closer. The alien commander appeared on screens across all human vessels, his yellow eyes showing what might have been amusement. Zexai asked if humans had prepared their surrender documents or if they still planned to resist with their primitive metal ships. Admiral Hayes responded that humanity had made its choice and would never surrender to slavers. She told Zexai that humans would fight for their freedom no matter what the cost might be. The Corvathi admiral made that strange laughing sound again and said that human stubbornness would only make their defeat more painful to watch. The battle began when Zexai gave the order to attack. Brilliant streams of plasma fire erupted from the Corvathi ships, lighting up space like a deadly fireworks display. The alien weapons tore through human shields as if they were made of paper. Within minutes, the USS Defender exploded in a ball of fire, followed quickly by the USS Guardian and USS Protector. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the USS Horizon as human ships died around him. The Corvathi plasma cannons were destroying human vessels faster than Jake had imagined possible. It seemed that Admiral Zexai had been right about the hopelessness of human resistance, but Jake and his crew had a plan that they hoped the aliens would never expect. Working with Dr. Nathan Cross's research, they had modified mining charges to target the brief moments when Corvathi shields weakened during power transfers. The plan required getting dangerously close to enemy ships and hitting them at exactly the right moment. Commander Kate Walsh piloted the USS Defiance in a suicide run toward a Corvathi destroyer. Her ship absorbed hit after hit from alien weapons as she closed the distance. At the last possible moment, Kate fired her modified charges directly at the enemy ship's shield generator just as it cycled power to weapons. The explosion that followed shocked everyone, including the Corvathi. The alien destroyer's shields collapsed completely, and secondary explosions ripped through its hull. For the first time in the battle, a Corvathi ship had been seriously damaged by human weapons. Admiral Zexai stared at his tactical display in confusion. His sensors told him that a human ship had somehow penetrated Corvathi shields, but that should have been impossible. The admiral ordered his fleet to increase their attack, determined to crush this unexpected resistance quickly. Dr. Nathan Cross monitored the battle from Earth's command center, analyzing every piece of data from the fighting. Nathan realized that the Corvathi had another weakness beyond their shield cycling. The aliens seemed unable to adapt quickly to unexpected tactics because their entire military philosophy was based on technological superiority rather than tactical flexibility. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded the USS Valiant and began using hit-and-run attacks against the Corvathi formation. Instead of engaging in direct combat, Amy ordered her ship to strike quickly and then retreat before the aliens could respond effectively. This type of guerrilla warfare in space was something that Corvathi had never encountered in their centuries of conquest. The alien fleet started to show signs of confusion as more human ships adopted these unexpected tactics. Admiral Zexai had conquered 47 worlds, but every previous enemy had fought in traditional formations that Corvathi technology could easily overcome. These humans kept doing things that made no tactical sense according to Corvathi military doctrine. Ryan Blake coordinated attacks from multiple human ships, timing their strikes to hit different Corvathi vessels at the same moment. This forced the aliens to split their attention and defensive fire among several targets instead of concentrating on one threat at a time. The strategy was costly for humans, but it prevented the Corvathi from using their superior firepower efficiently. As the hours passed, more Corvathi ships suffered damage from human attacks. The aliens were still winning the battle by any reasonable measure, but they were not winning as easily as they had expected. Admiral Zexai found himself dealing with something he had never experienced before. an enemy that refused to give up even when facing certain defeat. Lisa Grant worked frantically to keep human ships operational as they absorbed massive damage from Corvathi weapons. She coordinated repair efforts across the fleet through emergency communication channels, helping damaged vessels stay in the fight longer than should have been possible. The USS Horizon, under Jake Morrison's command, managed to destroy a second Corvathi ship using the same shield cycling tactic that Kate Walsh had pioneered. Jake's success proved that the technique could be repeated, giving other human captains hope that they might actually hurt the enemy before dying. Dr. Nathan Cross made another crucial discovery while studying the battle data. The Corvathi seemed to have difficulty understanding why humans continued fighting when victory was mathematically impossible. This psychological factor was causing hesitation and uncertainty in the alien fleet that humans could potentially exploit. Admiral Z received reports from his ship captains that contradicted everything in Corvathi military experience. His officers described human vessels that continued attacking even after suffering fatal damage, and human crews that seemed to celebrate causing minor damage to Corvathi ships even as their own vessels exploded around them. By the end of the first day of battle, 22 human ships had been destroyed, but 6 Corvathi vessels had also been damaged or destroyed. The exchange rate still favored the aliens heavily, but Admiral X-High had expected to lose no ships at all against such primitive opponents. While the space battle continued above Earth, Corvathi ground forces began landing on human colonies throughout the solar system. Transport ships descended on Lunar Base, Mars Colony, and the mining stations in the asteroid belt. Admiral X-High had decided that conquering human settlements would force the stubborn Earth fleet to surrender and end this unexpectedly difficult fight. General Marcus Stone commanded the defense of Lunar Base when the first Corvathi dropships appeared in the lunar sky. Marcus had fought in colonial wars before, but he had never faced enemies with energy, weapons, and personal armor that could stop human bullets. The alien soldiers were 7 feet tall with the same green scales as Admiral X-High, and they moved with the confidence of a species that had never lost a ground battle. Commander Yothkar led the Corvathi ground assault forces with the same certainty of victory that had served his people for centuries. Yothkar expected the human defenders to surrender quickly once they saw the futility of fighting against superior Corvathi equipment. Every other species had followed this logical pattern, choosing life as slaves over pointless death in battle. The first human resistance shocked Yothkar and his troops. Sergeant Danny Price and his squad held a communication array on lunar surface for 18 hours against overwhelming odds. The humans had turned the facility into a fortress, using mining equipment and improvised explosives. When Corvathi plasma weapons finally breached their defenses, Danny triggered charges that destroyed the entire complex and killed dozens of alien soldiers. Dr. Nathan Cross worked desperately in his laboratory on Earth, trying to find new ways to help human forces fight the technologically superior. Nathan had discovered that certain electromagnetic frequencies could disrupt Corvathi nervous systems, but the effect required close range and enormous amounts of power. Building a weapon based on this discovery would be dangerous and might not work at all. On Mars Colony, Commander Beth Turner organized civilian resistance alongside military units. Beth had expected the colonists to evacuate or hide when the aliens landed, but instead they volunteered to fight. Farmers and miners picked up weapons and joined the defense, refusing to abandon the world they had spent their lives building. The Corvathi ground forces found themselves facing tactics they had never encountered before. Human defenders would fight to the death for positions that had no strategic value, forcing the aliens to waste time and resources on objectives that should have been abandoned immediately. Yothkar could not understand why humans would die for buildings and equipment, instead of preserving their lives for more important battles. Lisa Grant solved the power problem for Dr. Nathan Cross's electromagnetic weapon by suggesting they use a ship's main reactor as the energy source. This meant the weapon could only be deployed once before destroying the vessel that carried it. But Lisa believed that trading one human ship for the chance to damage Corvathi forces would be worthwhile. Captain Jake Morrison volunteered to test the new neural disruptor weapon against the Corvathi flagship. Jake knew that his ship, the USS Horizon, would probably be destroyed in the attempt, but he also knew that humanity needed every possible advantage against the aliens. The weapon had to be deployed at point-blank range, which meant getting past the entire Corvathi fleet. The defense of the asteroid mining stations provided another example of human determination that confused the Corvathi station chief Tony Martinez refused evacuation orders and instead organized the miners into guerrilla units. When Corvathy forces captured the main facility, Tony's people continued fighting from the mining tunnels, using industrial equipment as weapons. Commander Yothkar reported to Admiral Xi that human resistance was stronger than expected, but assured his commander that the colonies would fall within days. Yothkar could not bring himself to admit that he was beginning to feel something the Corvathy military had never experienced: uncertainty about victory. Grace Thompson commanded the USS Eagle in a desperate mission to escort Jake Morrison's ship through the Corvathy fleet. Grace knew that her smaller vessel could not survive long against alien weapons, but she was determined to give Jake the best possible chance to reach the enemy flagship. Paul Johnson and his crew on the USS Hawk joined the escort mission, accepting that they were probably flying to their deaths. The breakthrough came when Dr. Nathan Cross successfully tested his neural disruptor against captured Corvathy equipment. The electromagnetic pulse completely shut down alien technology for several minutes, proving that the weapon could be effective. Nathan immediately began working with military engineers to install the device on the USS Horizon. On Lunar Base, General Marcus Stone made the difficult decision to abandon the main facility and continue fighting from the mining complexes beneath. The surface, Marcus knew that conventional warfare could not stop the Corvathy, but he believed that guerrilla tactics might slow them down enough for Earth to develop better weapons. The human colonists on Mars surprised Commander Beth Turner with their determination to fight. Instead of complaining about the danger or demanding evacuation, they asked for weapons and training. Beth realized that the Corvathy threat had awakened something in humanity that even she had not expected to see. Captain Amy Rodriguez led a series of hit-and-run attacks against Corvathy supply ships, trying to disrupt their ground operations. Amy's ship, the USS Defiance, had been heavily damaged in earlier battles, but her crew kept the vessel operational through determination and creative engineering. Admiral Xi grew increasingly frustrated with reports from his ground commanders. The humans were supposed to surrender once they saw Corvathy power, but instead they seemed to fight harder as their situation became more hopeless. The Admiral began to suspect that human psychology was fundamentally different from any species the Corvathy had previously encountered. The neural disruptor weapon installation on the USS Horizon was completed just as Jake Morrison received word that the escort ships were ready for the suicide mission. Jake looked at his crew and realized that none of them expected to survive the next few hours, but all of them were ready to try anyway. This was exactly the kind of human determination that the aliens could not understand or calculate. The USS Horizon began its desperate run toward the Corvathy flagship with Grace Thompson's USS Eagle and Paul Johnson's USS Hawk flying close formation around it. The three human ships accelerated directly into the heart of the alien fleet, their crews knowing that this mission would probably be their last. Captain Jake Morrison watched the Corvathy vessels grow larger on his screen as plasma fire erupted around them. Grace Thompson's ship took the first hits as Corvathy destroyers focused their weapons on the small escort force, the USS Eagles. Shields collapsed within seconds, but Grace kept her ship moving forward, using its dying energy to cover Jake's approach to the flagship. Her last transmission was a simple message telling Jake to make the mission count for something. Paul Johnson held his position until Corvathy plasma cannons tore through the USS Hawk's hull. Paul's ship exploded in a brilliant flash, but the sacrifice allowed Jake to get within range of Admiral Xi's massive command vessel. The Corvathy flagship was 3 times larger than any human ship, with weapons that could destroy planets. But Jake pressed his attack anyway. Dr. Nathan Cross monitored the mission from Earth's command center, watching as his neural disruptor weapon was finally put to the test against a real Corvathy target. Nathan had spent weeks calculating the electromagnetic frequencies needed to disrupt alien nervous systems, but he would only know if his theories worked when Jake activated the device. Admiral Xi stood on his bridge watching the approaching human ship with something approaching admiration for human stubbornness. The alien commander had never seen a species that continued fighting when defeat was mathematically certain, but he still expected to destroy the USS Horizon before it could cause any real damage to his flagship. Jake Morrison activated the neural disruptor at point-blank range, flooding the Corvathy flagship with electromagnetic energy designed to attack alien biology. The effect was immediate and devastating. Admiral Xi collapsed at his command station as the weapon scrambled his nervous system, and similar scenes played out across the massive alien vessel. The neural disruptor worked better than Dr. Nathan Cross had dared to hope. Corvathy crew Members throughout the flagship fell unconscious or began convulsing as their nervous systems shut down. The alien command structure collapsed instantly, leaving the entire Corvathi fleet without central coordination for the first time in the battle. Admiral Susan Hayes seized the opportunity that Jake Morrison's sacrifice had created. Susan ordered every remaining human ship to attack while the Corvathi fleet was in chaos. The 25 surviving vessels of Earth's Defense Force pressed their assault with the fury of people who had watched their friends die for the chance at this moment. Captain Steve Clark commanded the USS Valiant in a ramming attack against a Corvathi destroyer after his ship's weapons were destroyed by enemy fire. Steve's vessel struck the alien ship at full speed, crippling both vessels in an explosion that lit up the battlefield. The sight of human ships deliberately sacrificing themselves to damage the enemy sent waves of fear through the Corvathi ranks. On the surface of Lunar Base, the neural disruptor technology gave human ground forces their first real advantage against Corvathi troops. Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Green led an assault on the alien command center in New York using portable versions of the electromagnetic weapon. The Corvathi soldiers, who had seemed invincible before, suddenly found themselves vulnerable to human attack. Major Chris Parker coordinated guerrilla attacks across Asia using the new weapons technology. Chris had been fighting a losing battle against Corvathi ground forces for weeks, but now his troops could actually hurt the aliens. The psychological effect on both sides was enormous as human resistance began to push back against the invasion. Admiral Zexai gradually recovered from the neural attack, but he found his fleet in complete disarray. Corvathi ships were firing at random targets or trying to retreat from the human counterattack. The alien admiral had never experienced military chaos before, and he struggled to understand how his technologically superior force could be losing control of the battle. Human ships pressed their advantage ruthlessly, using every tactic they had learned during the desperate early days of the war. Captain Amy Rodriguez led coordinated strikes against damaged Corvathi vessels, while Ryan Blake coordinated targeting information across the human fleet to maximize the effectiveness of their limited firepower. Commander Yothkar found his ground, forces in retreat for the first time in Corvathi military history. The neural disruptor weapons had neutralized the aliens' technological advantages, and human troops were fighting with a determination that terrified the Corvathi soldiers. Yothkar requested permission from Admiral Zexai to use orbital bombardment against human cities. The Corvathi ground commander believed that destroying entire population centers would finally break human resistance, but intercepted communications revealed something that shocked him. Humans were not afraid of orbital bombardment. Instead, they were angry about it and more determined than ever to fight. Yothkar could not understand how destroying human cities would make the survivors fight harder instead of surrendering. Dr. Nathan Cross began mass production of neural disruptor technology as reports poured in about its effectiveness against Corvathi forces. Nathan worked with military engineers to install the weapons on every human ship and ground unit, finally giving humanity a tool that could hurt the seemingly invincible aliens. Admiral Susan Hayes reorganized the human fleet around the new weapons, developing tactics that maximized their effectiveness. Susan realized that humans now had a real chance to win this war, but only if they could maintain the pressure on the confused and demoralized Corvathi forces. The news of human success spread throughout the solar system, inspiring resistance fighters on every occupied world. On Mars, Commander Beth Turner led a general uprising against Corvathi occupation forces. On the asteroid mining stations, Tony Martinez's guerrilla fighters emerged from their tunnels to reclaim their facilities. Admiral Zexai attempted to restore order to his fleet, but he discovered that his officers were as confused as he was about how to fight an enemy that refused to follow logical military principles. The Corvathi had always won through demonstrations of superior technology, but the humans seemed to become more determined as their losses mounted rather than less determined. 3 months had passed since the Corvathi Empire first demanded human surrender, and Admiral Zexai found himself in a situation that no Corvathi commander had ever faced before. Despite having superior technology and overwhelming numbers, his forces were slowly losing the war of attrition against an enemy that refused to accept defeat. Human resistance had not only continued, but had grown stronger with each passing day. Dr. Nathan Cross completed the final tests on large-scale neural disruptors that could disable entire Corvathi battle groups at once. The weapons required enormous amounts of power, but human engineers had found ways to mount them on specially modified ships. Nathan watched as the first successful field test completely shut down a squadron of alien vessels, proving that humanity could now fight the Corvathi on equal terms. Captain Jake Morrison, who had survived his suicide mission against the Corvathi flagship, now commanded a rebuilt human fleet equipped with the latest neural disruptor technology. The USS Indomitable served as the new flagship, and Jake felt a grim satisfaction as he led attacks against the same alien forces that had once seemed invincible. The Corvathi High Command received reports that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare and conquest. Admiral Zexai described human civilians who celebrated the destruction of their own cities if it meant taking Corvathi forces with them. He reported military units that refused evacuation and instead fought alongside civilian populations against impossible odds. Most disturbing of all, he described captured humans who somehow escaped and continued fighting despite injuries that should have been fatal. President Helen Carter stood in the ruins of Geneva after a Corvathi orbital bombardment and delivered a speech that was broadcast to every human world. The aliens had destroyed the city in an attempt to break human morale, but Helen used the devastation as a backdrop for her most important address to the human race. She spoke about the true nature of the war and what it meant for humanity's future. Helen's words resonated across human space as she explained that the Corvathi had calculated human military strength and found it lacking. They had analyzed human technology and dismissed it as primitive. They had studied human tactics and considered them ineffective. But there was one thing the aliens had never measured or understood, and that was the human will to remain free. President continued by saying that humans did not fight because they were certain of victory. They fought because they could not accept surrender. Freedom was not something that could be calculated or measured by alien computers. It was something that lived in the human heart, and no amount of superior technology could destroy it. Yothkar made one final attempt to break human resistance by targeting Earth's orbital defense platforms. The Corvathi ground commander had grown desperate as his forces continued to suffer defeats against human guerrilla fighters equipped with neural disruptor weapons. Yothkar believed that destroying Earth's defenses would finally force humanity to surrender. Admiral Susan Hayes commanded the defense of Earth's orbital installations from the bridge of the USS Liberty. Susan had rebuilt the human fleet around captured Corvathi technology and the neural disruptor weapons that had proven so effective. When Yothkar's forces attacked, they faced not the primitive human vessels from 3 months ago, but ships that combined the best of both technologies. The final battle for Earth began when Admiral Zexai committed his remaining forces to one last assault on humanity's homeworld. The alien admiral had received orders from the Corvathi High Command to end the war immediately, regardless of the cost. Zexai's depleted fleet faced not only Earth's rebuilt defenses, but also human ships that had traveled from every corner of human space to defend their home. Captain Amy Rodriguez led a squadron of ships from Mars Colony in a coordinated attack against the Corvathi battle line. Amy's vessels used the hit-and-run tactics that have proven so effective throughout the war, but now they were armed with weapons that could actually destroy alien ships instead of just damaging them. The psychological effect on the Corvathi was devastating. Dr. Nathan Cross watched from Earth's command center as neural disruptor weapons, now standard equipment on all human vessels, tore through the Corvathi formation. The aliens had no defense against weapons designed to attack their biology rather than their technology. Ships that had seemed indestructible 3 months ago now fell to human attacks. Admiral Zexai found his flagship surrounded by human vessels as his fleet disintegrated around him. The alien commander had lost more than half his ships, and the survivors were in full retreat toward the edge of the solar system. For the first time in Corvathi history, a conquered species had not only resisted but had actually defeated their would-be conquerors. The Corvathi admiral opened a final communication channel to the human fleet as his crippled flagship limped away from Earth. Zexai appeared on screens throughout the human fleet, his yellow eyes showing an emotion that no human had seen in them before. The alien admitted that his people had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. ZE. HAI explained that the Corvathi Empire had conquered 47 worlds by demonstrating technological superiority and forcing logical surrender. When resistance became pointless, they had calculated human military strength, analyzed human technology, and predicted human tactics, but they had never considered the possibility of a species that would choose death over slavery. The alien admiral continued by saying that human victory was not based on superior weapons or better tactics. It was based on something that the Corvathi could not understand or measure. Humans possessed a will to be free that transcended logic and calculation. They fought not because they could win, but because they could not accept defeat. Admiral Zexhire's final words to humanity were both an admission of defeat and a warning. He told the humans that they had taught the Korvathi Empire something new about the nature of warfare and conquest. Some species could not be conquered, no matter how superior the technology brought against them. Some spirits could not be broken, no matter how overwhelming the odds. The war ended with humanity not only surviving but beginning to reverse engineer Korvathi technology for their own use. The threat that had nearly destroyed the human race became the foundation for Earth's expansion into the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison, promoted to admiral, led the first human deep space exploration fleet, carrying the knowledge that sometimes will alone could overcome any obstacle. Human colonies began spreading across the galaxy, each one a testament to the simple truth that Admiral Zexhire had learned too late: never underestimate humanity's will to be free.